Hello, hello. We are live. All right, I'm going to take 1 minute to send out a tweet, let folks know we're live. All right. And so we've got 5 folks here live. Thank you for joining. Let me go ahead and take a look at the chat, see if we have any questions yet. All right. So just to get things started here, as you probably know from the announcements, I decided to do this Q&A to give folks in the Aragon community a chance to ask me any questions about AGP-1, the Aragon governance proposal process that is currently under public review before we vote on whether to adopt or reject AGP-1 next week. So a little bit of backstory about AGP-1. So before I joined the project last November, almost a year ago, the founders of the project and early team members had already been thinking of ways to involve the Aragon community more in Aragon community governance. And this took the form at the time of the Aragon community governance model and the governance repo that we currently have under the Aragon GitHub organization. Excuse me. So the governance repo was used to propose kind of community-wide changes and to get feedback from community members about these proposed changes before they would actually go and get implemented. For example, perhaps one of the most well-known AGPs to date, it was AGP-5, which had us switch from using Slack to Rocket Chat as the primary chat platform of the Aragon community. And this was a big decision. It affected a lot of people in the community. And so the core Aragon team members wanted to get everyone's input before making that big decision. And it ended up being an AGP that went beyond just the Aragon community to include other communities as well. So in that sense, the governance process was successful not only for us, but also for other teams in the ecosystem that were realizing some of the shortcomings of Slack. However, there was never really a formal process or any sort of standardization around when a decision should be an AGP versus when the core team should just make the decision unilaterally. And I think that in some ways has also hindered community involvement in the governance process, because there could be questions about, is this appropriate to do as an AGP, or should I just, go and do it? And so the purpose of AGP-1 is to try to answer these questions and formalize the process a little bit so that anybody can quickly read through AGP-1, understand what makes a good AGP, and then submit their proposal to make it happen. So we have a draft that's currently on GitHub. Like I said, it's been under review for a while now. I'll share the main forum thread in the chat that basically has most of the discussion that's happened during the review so far. Any comments or feedback, questions that has come up since first posting this thread, even if it's happening somewhere else, like for example, some of the conversation was happening on GitHub. I've been porting that conversation back into the main thread here. So, so we had a couple of questions that came up a while ago. And for folks that are just joining the discussion, I'm happy to kind of review those questions and kind of explain some of the rationale here. So one of the first good questions on this thread is basically about how currently under AGP-1, it seems like a lot of the decision-making is still, the decision-making power is still centralized around the Aragon Association. And so exactly what the comment says is, it would seem that in Aragon, the association is subject to votes that require a supermajority. That being said, the association decides who the editors are, and the editors can merge pull requests or move proposals from step 2 to 3. My immediate paranoia is that this is a bottleneck or worse. Some possible visions of doom include editors resorting to extortion, being blackmailed, or being gophers inserted in order to advance a malicious agenda or block a legitimate one. All of these processes can be done fairly covertly. What will Aragon do to prevent this? And my response, which you can read in full on the thread, is basically that this is a very astute and accurate observation, with one exception, which is that while under the current version of AGP-1, first I want to emphasize that this is not the final iteration of the Aragon governance proposal process. This is just one more step that we're taking along the journey to full decentralization of the project, turning over all decision-making power to A&T holders. That said, under this iteration, the Aragon Association has the power to decide which proposals ultimately get voted on by A&T holders. Because there's a final step before a proposal gets put onto the ballot, the Aragon Association Board of Directors has to vote unanimously to put the proposal on the ballot. And this is currently in place as a safeguard to prevent what I call bad proposals from getting put onto the ballot and voted on by A&T holders. For example, a proposal that says, send all of the money to this address and bribe all of these other voters to approve the proposal. That could be a potential, proposal that someone would create if there weren't a safeguard in place to prevent that from happening. And so right now, the Aragon Association Board of Directors has this power to prevent bad proposals from getting onto the ballot. And then as a check on the power of the association, A&T holders get the final vote. So the basic flow of a proposal under AGP-1 is somebody has an idea, it fits into one of the tracks that are defined in AGP-1. For example, it could be an association track, it could be a finance track, it could be a meta track, or it could be a proclamation track, AGP. They post a draft of this proposal, maybe an idea in a thread. After getting some feedback, they might actually write out a fully formed draft AGP, submit it as a pull request to the AGP's repo. The editors will take a look, make sure that it fits all of the criteria for what makes a good AGP, and then merge the pull request into the repo. At any point, the author of the AGP can tell the editor, hey, I'm done. I've got all the feedback. I've got this AGP in as good as condition as I expect it to be. I would like this to be moved into a final state. And then once the editors move it into a final state, the Aragon Association Board of Directors will review the AGP and then vote on whether to put the AGP on the ballot or not. If they unanimously vote to approve the AGP, then during the next voting cycle, that AGP will appear on the ballot for A&T holders to vote on. And then A&T holders will get to vote to approve or reject the AGP. If they approve it, then it gets executed. And if they reject it, then it goes back to the beginning of the process. And that's the basic flow. So as you can see in the flow, there's checks and balances along the way to getting an AGP approved. And we think those checks and balances are proportionate for kind of where the project is at in terms of its maturity. I'm really excited to get A&T holders involved in governance. That's why I'm doing this live stream right now. It's why I helped draft the AGP-1 proposal, and it's really why I'm involved with Aragon to begin with. So that was a really great question, Belisarius. Thanks a lot for asking. Let's see if there are any other questions that have shown up in the chat. Hello, Vahid. I hope I said that correctly. Hi, Yermu. Long time no see. And hello, Pavan. Thank you all for joining. If you have any questions about AGP-1, feel free to ask in the chat there. We're also taking questions in the forum thread if you don't have a YouTube account, or on Aragon Chat if you have an Aragon Chat account. So moving on to another question here. So we had one, it wasn't really a suggestion so much as a proposal. And the proposal was from GitHub user Ankit, AJ07, who suggested that that payments, say after an AGP has been approved for the finance track, he suggested that payments should be split up into milestones. So he says, suppose that someone proposes transferring funds from the association multisig to project XYZ to develop an Aragon app. The proposal is approved in the A&T vote with multiple checkpoints at which funds would get paid out. And then the association would execute the multisig transfer to transfer the funds when each checkpoint gets achieved. So this is like milestone-based funding. And this is not a bad idea. in fact, this is currently how we do nest payments, for example. There are milestones that are defined, and payments get released by the nest administrators as each of these milestones is reached. And then if the milestone isn't reached, then the payments stop. And so both Luke Duncan, governance researcher at Aragon, and I replied to this comment saying that you know, right now in the proposal, there's nothing that like excludes a proposal from using this milestone-based funding. And there's not even anything that would exclude A&T holders from rejecting every proposal that does not have milestone-based funding. So basically, like, this gives A&T holders ultimate flexibility, and AGP authors ultimate flexibility over how they define the payout schedule for their finance track AGPs. So that, you know, if it's something where milestone-based funding doesn't really make sense, they don't have to include milestones. Whereas if it's like a bigger project where there are clear, you know, points at which it makes sense, you know, that you would put milestones in place before releasing like a huge chunk of money or something, then there's nothing stopping A&T holders from giving that feedback during the draft process. And then, you know, if that feedback is not incorporated, then A&T holders can, you know, reject that proposal and say, you know, hey, it would have been great if it had milestones in it, but you didn't add those in like we suggested, so we're going to reject this proposal. So great suggestion from AJ07. We decided not to incorporate this requirement directly into AGP-1 because we wanted to give that flexibility to AGP authors and A&T holders to fund proposals both with and without milestones. But I can certainly see the merit to doing proposals with milestones. And we've got Gabriel in the building, in the chat here. Hi, Gabriel. And let's see, any other questions? No other questions in the chat. I will turn back to the thread where we've got most of the information here. All right, so the next comment on the thread was a clarifying question from Chris Remus, who asked, AGP-1 states that there's no minimum number of A&T required to participate. Does this mean non-A&T holders may participate? And it turned out that this was kind of a bug in the original draft of the proposal at this time when he asked this question. So I basically fixed the bug and added in a specific line that says that votes are token weighted, so that one A&T equals one vote. Now that has been changed, actually, because that was a bug too. You can actually vote with as small as like whatever it is, like 10 to the negative 18th power of A&T. So like 0.017 zeros and then one A&T, which is the smallest fraction of an A&T that you can hold. So like whatever that unit, we want to call that unit is, maybe that's like an A&T Finney. That is the smallest unit of a vote. That's one vote. And you require at least one of those like A and T finis to vote. Excuse me. So yeah, one A and T fini equals one vote, and votes are token weighted. So I have updated the AGP-1 draft to reflect that correction. Thank you, Chris, for the very eagle-eyed observation of spotting that bug in the proposal. And this is why I put this up for public review and comment, because I want to get feedback about the general, idea of AGP-1, but also it's really great to get specific corrections. And speaking of specific corrections, the next one that came up was just a day later from Bingen, who's a Solidity engineer at Aragon 1. My colleague was kind enough to point out that the minimum support required that I put in the proposal for MetaTrack proposals, it was, when I wrote it, I was like, super majority, 66% is kind of like, it's around, 2/3, and it's a super majority technically. So it's easy to write, you can just say 66%. Anything greater than that is a passing proposal. But he pointed out that, if you want it to be 2/3, it's got to actually be 66.6 repeating for 16 decimals with a 7 at the end. Because the last 6 rounds up to a 7. Excuse me. Which would kind of be like the maximum precision to get as close to 2/3 as possible. And then Jorge came along. Jorge is the CTO at Aragon 1 and the co-founder of the project. He came along and he pointed out that, 2/3 is actually like not that arbitrary. I had said that in a private conversation that, like 66 or 66.66, what's the big difference? And he said, 2/3, like specifically 2/3 is actually has this nice quality that there must be more than twice the number of supporting votes as rejecting votes for a proposal to pass. And so, that seemed like a good enough reason to change this this from 66 to try to get 66% to try to get it to as close to 2/3 as possible. So I went ahead and agreed to change the proposal to be 66.6 repeating forever. And so I want to thank both Bingen and Jorge for pointing out this. It seemed bike sheddy to me at first, but there's actually like good reasoning behind this. So want to thank them for pointing out this. Seems minor, but I think it's actually a significant improvement to the proposal. So I'll be adjusting the AGP-1 draft to reflect this change. This conversation just happened yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to do this yet. So I'll be updating AGP-1 to do this, to implement this later today. And let's see. We got 2 questions. They're general questions on Aragon. And as far as I can tell, based on the Aragon chat and the forum, I think we've covered most of the questions and all of the questions and feedback that we've gotten so far on this proposal, at least on these channels. So we have this live stream until 10 o'clock Pacific time, which is another 35 minutes. So happy to jump into some general questions while we're here. And then if anyone has any questions about AGP-1, like in the meantime, I'm happy to get to those questions as well. So jumping in here, first, Pavan has a question. What is the future strategic plan on PR? And I'm guessing he means he or she. I'm not sure the gender of that name. I'm guessing that they mean PR, like public relations for the Aragon project. Well, the exciting thing is that now that we're on mainnet, we can start to see people using Aragon in the wild, with real money, and that means that we're going to have like real money use cases to talk about. And so, in addition to sharing news and developments around different projects that are adopting Aragon for real world use cases, we'll also be sharing news about continued progress developing the Aragon DApp. We don't plan on doing any major PR pushes in the immediate near future, because we're really still like this mainnet release was kind of like it's not a beta, it's not a test, but it's like, let's call it a mainnet preview of what could be possible with decentralized organizations running on the Ethereum mainnet with real funds. But there's still a lot of work to go to make this a mainstream ready decentralized application. And so before we put time and money and other resources into doing significant PR pushes and marketing blitzes to try to reach a broader audience, we want to make sure that the product is ready. Ready for those audiences to start using and getting value from. And we've made a lot of progress towards that goal, but we're not quite there yet. So I would say it's going to be still quite some time, maybe a year or longer, before we will actually be putting any significant amount of resources into like PR and marketing. So great question. We don't plan on ignoring it forever, certainly not. But we want to be strategic about when we start deploying resources to public relations. And then the next question is from Yannick in the live chat here, who asks, can you give me an example of how Aragon might come into benefit for an enterprise? Perhaps a basic example of a use case. I really enjoy your work and initiative. Well, thank you for the support, and great question. And there are a bunch of different potential answers to this because Aragon is such a powerful and flexible tool. As Yannick probably knows, but for other folks who are new to the project, Aragon is a decentralized application that can be used for creating really any kind of organization and have that organization run almost entirely on Ethereum. So you can define the governance rules of your organization, like who has voting power and how much voting power do they have? What are the parameters that are required for proposals to be passed by these voters? And then you can also deposit funds directly into a vault that is collectively governed by all of the members of the organization. So you can put DAI or ANT or Ether or any cryptocurrency that token any kind of digital asset that lives on Ethereum into a vault. And then all of the members of the organization can submit proposals for how to allocate the resources that are held in the vault. For example, making a payment to a contractor, you would submit a transfer, and then that transfer would be voted on by all of the members of the organization. And people are developing new apps for Aragon all of the time. So like some people are working on apps that will help an organization plan what projects to allocate resources to in the future. So people will be able to vote on the projects that they like and then allocate funds to those projects so that other people can start working on the projects. So Yannick asks, change of company vision, payment to employees, timesheets, like a portal system. Really all of these things, actually. So the voting app currently handles two different kinds of votes. One is what I would call a non-binding vote, which is like almost like a survey, where it's just you ask a question and you get a yes or no answer from the voters. Something like, should the company increase everyone's salaries by 10% next year, just as an example. And then people will be able to vote yes or no. The outcome of that vote is not going to be enforced by Ethereum. It will still require further action by the members of the organization or the administrators in the organization to actually increase the salaries by 10%. But the question, by getting an answer to the question, the management or the other members of the organization now have better information, oh, everyone wants a salary increase. We should do that. Or, everyone wants a salary increase, but, now we have to show why that can't happen. So those are the non-binding or advisory votes. And then there are the binding votes. And these are the votes that actually affect action that happens with a transfer of assets on chain. So for example, any transfers from the finance app can be programmed to require a binding vote. So if you have, say, 100 Ether in the finance app, and you want to make a payment to a contractor, you just go to the finance app, you click the new transfer button, you enter the contractor's address and how much Ether you want to send them, and then you submit the transfer. The finance app will tell you, hey, you don't have permission to transfer these funds directly, but you can create a vote, and if the vote gets approved by the token holders in this organization, then the transfer will get executed and the contractor will get paid. So you create the vote, and then the vote shows up in the voting app for all of the other token holders in the organization to see. And then they have a certain window of time during which they can vote to approve or reject the transfer. And finally, there's Aragon has a very granular permission system, so that you can say that some individual members in the organization have power to spend funds directly from the finance app. For example, like a CFO in your organization, or maybe a multi-sig that's controlled by the CEO, the CFO, and the COO. If 2 out of 3 of them approve the transfer, then it can go through without a vote by all of the token holders. But if anyone else tries to make a transfer out of the finance app, it has to go through a vote first. you can get very granular with the permissions in the Aragon organizations. So those are some examples of ways that Aragon could work for like a traditional organization, like a company or a nonprofit that we're used to operating with. Excuse me. And I'll say one more thing about this, which is that what I think is really interesting, not to say that those use cases aren't interesting, because I think just empowering traditional organizations is already like a huge win for this technology. But what's also really cool is the new use cases that Aragon enables for digital native organizations. So now that we have all of these tokens and protocols and networks being built on top of Ethereum, you know, these new decentralized applications like MakerDAO, for example, has basically a decentralized bank that issues private currency backed by Ether. And it's all controlled by smart contracts and token holders and governed by token holders. So like MakerDAO has no real need to interact with the traditional world, with traditional organizations. All of its activities are confined to the blockchain. But as a decentralized organization, MakerDAO still needs tools for governing its system. You know, choosing who the price feeds or who the price oracles are, deciding what forms of collateral dye the stablecoin that is issued by the MakerDAO, what forms of collateral will be accepted by the smart contracts, deciding when and if to upgrade the smart contracts to new code. These decisions have to be made. You know, when smart contracts first came out, making those decisions. You know, the original like lead developer of the smart contracts, using what's called an only owner smart contract, but that's not very decentralized, because that guy could get hit by a bus, he could get coerced into pushing a malicious update, he could become corrupt and try to, you know, take all of the money for himself. There are a lot of things that could go wrong when you have an only owner contract. So if you want smart contract upgrades to be the governance of smart contract upgrades and other kinds of parameter changes in your smart contract to be decentralized, you need a more robust decentralized governance system. And Aragon provides tools for doing that. So like using a tool like Aragon, a smart contract developer can build upgradability into their smart contracts and then have that upgradability governed by a decentralized network of token holders. We also have an interesting system that we've built for deploying the Aragon application called Aragon Package Manager, which is kind of like a decentralized package manager that lives on Ethereum. And so you can use an Aragon organization to govern the contents of these package repos, so that you don't have just one person, again, like pushing software updates to the users of the applications that rely on this package repo. These are like relatively technical use cases because they're aimed at developers, but they do solve like real problems in that world. So Yannick has another question. So Aragon will have dApps running on top of it, and pretty much anyone can code a dApp on Aragon. Yes, that is correct. So first, like, there's Aragon itself, which is a decentralized application, which will be governed by Aragon. So in a way, you know, we had to build Aragon before we could actually realize the vision of Aragon, which is a decentralized network that's governed by the token holders. There just weren't any good tools for doing this kind of decentralized governance when the Aragon network was first envisioned. And so we had to build those tools. And that's Aragon OS, Aragon JS, the Aragon front end that people use to decentralize application, Aragon package manager. All of these tools were built, in service of the Aragon network. But it also turns out that these tools will also be useful to many other dApp developers and many other kinds of organizations as well. So we want as many people as possible to use these tools to create decentralized organizations, to build decentralized governance into their decentralized applications and other software, and then once we have a large number of these decentralized organizations out there, then the Aragon network can start providing services to those organizations, such as dispute resolution, which is the first service that we're targeting. And yes, Aragon OS is an open source permissionless system, so anybody can build a dApp and integrate Aragon OS for governance into their decentralized application, into their smart contracts. Anyone that's building like decentralized applications or decentralized websites or anything that might use like Aragon package manager can use Aragon OS for decentralized governance. There are many potential use cases, and it's all open source. It's all permissionless. Anyone can use it. Anyone can build with it, and we'll be happy to help. So great questions, Yannick. Thank you. I'm going to take a look at the thread and see if any other questions have come up. Maybe take a look at the live or Aragon chat as well. No new questions in the forum. No new questions there or there. Let me check the Twitter feed. Got to cover all my bases here. Maybe. Nope, just an Ether giveaway. Or Neo? Guess the scammers are giving away Neo now. All right. Please don't send Ether to the Neo giveaway scammers. All right, so no more questions right now that have popped up in the live chat or any of the other channels. So I might just call this done early rather than wait around. So to wrap things up, I just want to remind folks that so the next steps in the process to getting AGP-1 approved or rejected, which I hope doesn't happen, but A&T holders have the power to do this if they want. So the next steps to like getting AGP-1 voted on, let's just say, the public review and comment period ends today. So at like midnight tonight, which is kind of when I'm going to stop looking at comments, AGP-1 will be frozen. And then the Aragon Association Board of Directors is going to review it and make any final comments on AGP-1, and then hold a vote on whether to put AGP-1 on the ballot next week or not. And if they vote unanimously to approve AGP-1, then the version that they vote on will be put onto the ballot next Thursday, November 15th. The vote will start at midnight UTC on the 15th and last for 48 hours. During that 48-hour time period, A&T holders will have a chance to vote with their A&T on whether to approve AGP-1 and adopt it as the kind of official governance model of the Aragon project, or to reject it, in which case it's back to the drawing board and we have to communicate with the community to find out what they would like to see instead. So mark your calendars. November 15th, midnight, UTC. There's going to be an A&T holder vote on whether to approve or reject AGP-1. The vote lasts for 48 hours. So get your A&T ready to vote on AGP-1. That's it for today's live stream. Thanks everyone for joining. If you're watching this after it's recorded, I hope you enjoyed the discussion. If it's before the AGP-1 vote, please get your A&T ready to vote. And if it's after the vote, then I hope that this was educational all the same. This video will, of course, be preserved for historical purposes. And that's going to be it for today. So thanks again for joining. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And please vote this Thursday, November 15th, A&T. Bye.